Welcome, welcome, welcome. How many of you guys, this is your first day to be here for the series? You guys missed out then. How many of you guys have not missed any of the series so far? Yeah, I know why. I know. We're having a drawing, and if you hadn't got your passport stamped for each message of the series, then you don't get in the drawing. But if you're here for the whole series, man, you get in the drawing. So that's why all these people have been here. Don't let them fool you. They're not better than you. They're just here for the gas card. We want them to get away. I'm doing this series called I Want to Get Away, and I think as I process my life and I process people I talk to and I see what's going on in our world, I think people are just, the word I come to is overwhelmed. Like life is supposed to be lived at this level, and so as we go through life, everybody's on, kind of going through at their pace, and everybody's taking on what they can handle. And then all of a sudden, man, something happens in our life, and we come up to this place like we didn't expect this. And it goes over what the norm is, right? And we start to feel overwhelmed. And when we run in this state of being overwhelmed for any period of time, then we start to not think and act as if we had in the past when everything was right. And so then we start getting this idea that if I could just get away, could make everything better. And today, man, if you're here and you feel that way, maybe it was nothing that you did, that you didn't overschedule or you didn't do anything to get your life in this situation. A lot of us, man, it just happens to us, doesn't it? And so if you're here today and maybe that's where you're at, it's just been happening to you and you're just feeling that desire to fly, man, just to get out. Get away from it all and take a break. I want you to know that you're not alone, that this isn't a new thing, okay? Probably everybody that's in this room, so that includes the person sitting next to you, has felt this way at some time or another. And I know that because as I went back, I was reading through the Bible and I was coming across these stories, and it was just one after another of these great people that we think are just the most amazing people that ever lived. I mean, there's stories in the Bible. Like, that's a big deal, right? And when I look, they wanted to get away. They dealt with the same stuff we deal with. So we're not alone in this. This is what humanity's been dealing with. Everybody's like, well, they don't understand. Our culture, our pace is so fast-paced, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. Well, let's go back thousands of years today. There was this guy in the Bible, and his name was David. He was a king of Israel. Now, here's the thing about David that's so astonishing to me, is that when he's described in the New Testament, he's described as a man after God's own heart. So, like, David wasn't some nitwit that, we're looking at in the Old Testament going, oh, man, I'm glad I'm not like that dude. David was a man after God's own heart. He was a passionate king that passionately pursued God. But I want to read you something, and this is David's account, and this is from the book of Psalms, it's Psalm chapter 55. Now, if you've been here long, I don't teach out of the Psalms a whole lot because you have to read a whole lot when you read the Psalms, because the Psalms are David's writings later about events that happened previously. It's his description of his encounters and his kind of like his journals are his songs that he wrote about things that had happened in the past. But as I was reading and I come across this in Psalm chapter 55, listen to this psalm, this cry out that David has. And I'm in a New Living Translation today. Throw you a curveball. I got a bunch of them. I can go all day. The reason I wanted to read it in this is because I don't want you to get lost in the language of it, okay? I think the Psalms are beautiful, and I think the way it's written is beautiful. I don't want you to get lost in the language of it. I need you to hear what David's plea was. Isaiah, why do I keep saying that? Psalm 55 says this, verse 1. Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my cry for help. Amen? Please listen and answer me, for I am overwhelmed by my troubles. If you're reading along in your Bible, man, it's okay. It's not unholy to circle that. Circle that, overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed. My enemies shout at me, making loud and wicked threats. They bring trouble on me, haunting me in their anger. Listen to this, and maybe you can relate. My heart is in anguish. Look at these words he uses. My heart is in anguish. The terror of death overpowers me. Fear and trembling overwhelm me. Overwhelmed. Anguish. Overpowered. Fear and trembling. I cannot stop shaking. Oh, listen to David's thoughts. Oh, how I wish I had wings like a dove. Then I would fly away and rest. I would fly far away to the quiet of the wilderness. How quickly I would escape far away from this wild storm of hatred. David's reaction to this being overwhelmed in this state of being in fear and listen, David was a powerful warrior, okay? David wasn't in fear that he would lose a battle. I think David's fear was an internal struggle. And I have a foundation for that. We just hadn't got to it yet. David wasn't afraid that somebody was going to hurt him. He just had this, I think it was fear of the unknown. Just an overwhelmed, deep hurt deep in his soul. And David responds in much the same way that you and I would like to respond. Now, I just got to get away. I got to get away. And a lot of times in our culture today, man, and the events of this week really bothered me. With Robin Williams' death, bothered me. I don't know if I liked his work, but I liked him as a person, and I was always rooting for him because you could see when he did his movies, you could see that there was always this deeper hurt that was there that would come out, and so it looked like great acting, but maybe it wasn't so much, you know? And I think about people needing to get away. And how do we handle that in our culture and our society? How do we handle those deep, dark places of depression? I mean, is David not describing depression? Anybody ever dealt with depression? I mean, you don't have to raise your hand, but I deal with depression a lot. And these are words I would use to describe those feelings. Anguish, hopelessness, overwhelmed is a overused word. I mean, overwhelmed is when you think about what it is, that's the feeling of just, I can't take one more thing or I'm going to freak out on you. We know how that is. And so as we're going through life, then we can't always just leave. So what do? Well, in our culture, a lot of times, man, this is where we escape to drugs or alcohol or shopping or buying stuff and shopping. Filling those empty places or escaping into something else. Sometimes we escape into darkness, man, like literal. Like we go in our rooms and shut out the lights. I was reading this story of this person, and she was talking about this depression, and she said she noticed that she's sleeping more and more and more and more, and then she wasn't ever leaving her room. She was just, the lights were off, and she just slept and slept and slept and was sleeping her life away. And that was an escape, a way to escape into getting away from the things that are are bothering us or that have hold of us. And so this idea that David is he's feeling this. Oh, man, just make me a bird. I mean, how many of you guys like Forrest Gump saw that movie? Like when they're praying in the field, this is what they're praying. She's praying from the Psalms. God, make me a bird that I can fly away, far, far away. And that's so many people's cries. God, just make me a bird so I can fly far, far away. I need out of my circumstance, my situation. Even if it's self-induced, that doesn't make it any better, right? I mean, even if we brought our troubles on ourselves, that doesn't mean the depression isn't real. Now, like me, I know you wouldn't do this, but I still find a way to blame other people. That's just me, though, because that's how I cope. Well, as we see David doing this, God, please just take me away from it. He says, like, put me in a shelter in the wilderness. Now, nobody wanted to go to the wilderness. Like, John the Baptist was the only dude that was like, hey, I'm from the wilderness. Nobody else wanted to go to the wilderness. They had to go out to the wilderness. The wilderness was a place where there were, death, snakes. Like, there were snakes out there. Why would you want to go out there? It was a desert. It was a wilderness. So he's like, please, God, take me out of this castle, off of this throne, out of this palace. Take me to the desert. Take me out of the middle of this humongous, great kingdom. I just got to get away from it. We would say David was successful, wouldn't we? And then we look at him and his cry, even in the middle of his success, is, God, take me away from this. But listen to what causes this. How many of you guys have prayed this? This is great. Destroy them, Lord, and confuse their speech. For I see violence and strife in the city. Its walls are patrolled day and night against invaders, but the real danger and wickedness within the city is wickedness within the city. Murder and robbery are everywhere there. Threats and cheating are rampant in the streets. But then David cuts right down to it. He gets like real with God. And instead of being general, like, I noticed this with the prophets. They were always saying things like, I'm the only one left. Or everybody else is this way. Or they're all that and I'm this. And we see that. When we start feeling sorry for ourselves and we sink into that deep hole, isn't that the way it feels? Like you are completely alone and on your own. And nobody cares. And nobody knows. Nobody knows. But get this in verse 12, and maybe you can really relate to this, man. This stung me pretty heavy. It is not an enemy who taunts me. I could bear that. This dude's a warrior, right? It's not an enemy that taunts me. I could bear that. It's not my foes who so arrogantly insult me. I could have hidden from them. Instead, it's you, my equal, my companion, my close friend. What good fellowship we once enjoyed when we walked together to the house of God, or in the house of God. See, there was this guy, and I can't pronounce his name, so I'm making no attempt. That's the way I read the Old Testament. He was evidently, we read in I think it's Samuel, you read this story, and he was David's closest friend, and he talks about being his spiritual guide, like a counselor. But when you read on, he was much closer than that. And David had this son, and his son's name was Absalom, and he was a very rebellious kid, and he was really, this goes back to some mistakes David made early in his life, and I don't have time to go into all that. But as Absalom grew, he started figuring out this way to actually kill David and take his kingdom. And so Absalom sets out at the city gates, and as people would come in to have King David judge their affairs, he's like, man, that's bad, but the king's going to judge against you. I would judge for you because I understand where you're coming from, and he's out of touch. And so he does this for like 4 years. And it's a very political thing, like it's very mudslinging campaign. And he's building up this army and all of these people against King David, his father. And the last person he gets is David's closest friend. And David's closest friend goes with David's rebellious son. And David has to flee the kingdom. And as the story, you can go read the story, but can you imagine the hurt of your closest friend and your son not just abandoning you, not just leaving you, but turning on you and then trying to take your kingdom and kill you, and the things they were saying that weren't true and the lies they were spreading. And when we do that, man, we start to have these feelings, right? And so this wasn't something David did to himself. This what had happened to him. And we have these things like this happen to us all the time in our lives. People around us hurt us. And they don't realize the damage they've done. And it's not the enemies. Our enemies don't bother us, do they? Who is it that hurts us the most? The ones we love the most. Sometimes it's not even that, though. Sometimes, man, there's a loss that you couldn't avoid. Wasn't any fault of your own. Things happen. But that bitterness and that hurt and that pain is still there. And as those things, those seeds start to take root, they grow into bitterness and hatred and unforgiveness and depression. And they're all connected together. All those things start to become connected together. David says in verse 16, though, this is how David says he'll handle this. But I will call on the Lord, and he will rescue me. Now, I want you to understand something about this verse. This is pretty cool. In the word-for-word translations, it uses the word, I will cast my cares or cast my troubles upon the Lord. And you see this quoted later in the New Testament by several of the disciples. Cast your troubles, cast your cares upon the Lord. Now the thing about this word cast, it's a very, very funky word. It's a Hebrew word. But the Hebrew word, the books tell us that the Hebrew word, it's an ancient Hebrew word. Now ancient Hebrew versus modern Hebrew was more of a language. Ancient Hebrew was more like the Egyptian language, which we know were pictures on walls in caves, right? And the picture for this word cast was a noun. And it was, ready? Anybody want to guess? Don't even want to think about it. Pelican. Pelican. So you learned something today at church. Pelican, your cares upon the Lord. Some of you guys have been pelicaned out of bars. Been pelicaned out of school. Right? Some of you guys want to pelican your kids out of the house. Now you got a word and you're going to talk in code to your spouse. Let's pelican the kids. They'll be like, what's going on? It's different than the pelican that you would wear on your arm or leg when you break something. English is crazy. We have too many words that are for different meanings. Some of you guys are looking forward to pelican your rod and reel after church today, right? Now, why does this even make sense? Where does this come from? Well, I want you to get this. Close your eyes. I want you to get this picture, right? Okay? Close your eyes. I'm serious about that. I don't want you to look at me. No. Okay, picture in your mind. Okay, you ever been on the Gulf or on a lake and it's calm and the water's just rolling? And you hear the birds. and the pelican's just gliding over the water, right? Shh, everything's peaceful. And all of a sudden, man, a 90-degree turn, right into the water. Okay, look at me. If you got that picture in your mind of a pelican diving into the water, slamming himself, thrusting his whole being directly into the water because he's going after food, right? And so they go like kamikaze, and it's a splash, and you're like, what happened? Like, anybody ever seen this? I mean, these birds look like, did that bird just commit suicide? That's what the word means. David says he will throw himself onto God as a pelican throws himself onto the water. See, it's more intense, right? Now we start to understand the picture of what David's committing himself to. I will cast my troubles, my cares. I will nosedive with everything into me, with all of my troubles and all of my cares into God, onto God. Look what else he says. Morning, noon, and night I plead aloud in my distress. Now you got to understand something. In the other translations it's more understandable because it says in the morning, evening, and at noon, right? And what I take from this in reading, David has given up the habit of the daily prayer times in the Jewish culture, the Jewish life. Or if he hadn't abandoned them completely, they were pointless. They had become religious. Like in the way the temple runs, you would have morning prayer, noon prayer, and evening prayer, right? So David says, I'm going to commit this time. I'm going back to where I started. Morning, noon, and night, I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to cast my cares on God, and I'm going to do this. And He rescues me and keeps me safe. And I was thinking about how that looked for us. Because everybody, if you've struggled with any of these things, with depression or addictions or any of these things, I'm sure countless times somebody's told you this and you wanted to kill them after that. So just give it to God. Right? And you're like, all right, man, thanks. Because you do that instead of hitting them, right? Yeah, I wish I'd have thought of that. The problem we run into is we have no idea what that means. We don't know how to give it to God. We hear people say that, and that's our Christian thing, man. We love to sling that one out there, right? Because when we don't know what else to say, we say stupid things. We like, man, I heard this once and it sounded so spiritual. Just give it to God. So we say that. We don't know what they're saying. We don't know what we're saying. They don't know what we're saying. Nobody knows, but it does sound good, and now I feel better and I can get out of this conversation. That one and the old, I'm praying for you, brother. How do I give it to God? How do I trust God? How do I depend on God? I know when God first becomes real to you, there's this hunger and drive and passion inside of us to be consumed by Him, to pursue Him with everything in us. But I noticed that as time goes, and Jesus kind of talks about this in a parable, as time goes, sometimes the cares of life start to take over, and sometimes we get busy, and sometimes we just fall out and we don't understand, and we just let it all go. And sometimes, storms happen, and we have dry seasons and everything withers up. And I understand that. But David's like, here's how you deal with it. We got to get back to that walk with God. Maybe you've never walked with God. This is where the peace in life comes from. If you read your Bible every day or read a verse of the day or whatever it looks like for you, and it's a religious thing, maybe that's what David was going through. Maybe it's time to get back to seeking God in that. Finding that time to just spend with God. I found that in my time where I'm seeking God, I don't remember reading the words that are on the pages. I think there's something about reading our Bible that makes us start to commune with God. It's more like, I'm not reading for information, I'm not reading for education, I'm not going to take a test. But as I start to read, something happens. It's like opening a door to the presence of God. And I don't care what you're reading. You can start at the front, start in the middle, start at the end. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what it is that you're actually reading. It's not the words that are transforming you, changing you, giving you life. It's not the words on the page that give life. It's God. It's the relationship and the communion with God that gives life. Maybe you drift and you get busy or you get tired and you've abandoned your prayer time. You're like, I don't even pray, or if I do, it's like, God help them. God help them. I heard this story. This was a preacher joke, and I don't like preacher jokes, so I'm going to tell you this one because I thought it was funny. There was a kid that came and told this preacher, he said, I don't have to say my prayers at night. He said, my mama does it for me, and he was puzzled. He says, well, how does your mom say your prayers for you? And she says, oh God, don't let me kill him tonight. We got to pray more than that. We got to pray more than when we're in trouble or when we're in... when we're in trouble, prayer is a great place to go. Unless your prayer is the magic genie. God's not your genie, okay? If you only pray to rub the lamp, then what's the point? Prayer is a communication between two friends. Prayer is me talking to God and Him talking to me, and most of our prayer time should be spent listening, not talking. Most of our prayer time should be like, God, what do you want to show me? And I'm not going anywhere till you do. Have you ever prayed that? That's bold, because you know you got to go to work. God, I'm not going anywhere until you tell me. You got 5 minutes. We've got to get back to these things, not in a religious way, man. Not in a, I checklist. I did my prayer time. I did my Bible reading today. I got my Jesus sticker on my car and my Christian t-shirt on. I'm ready to go for the day. No, how about going back to that place where you were actually seeking the presence of God? See, God's will for our life is that we spend our lives in His presence. I read this Oswald Chambers thing this morning, and I shared it with the volunteers. I'll share a little of it with you. I may share the whole thing. Just depends if I get going good or not. So it's an amazing thing, but this so much is about what we do. Oswald says this. He says, we tend to think that if Jesus Christ compels us to do something and we are obedient to Him, He will lead us to great success. Is that not the way we think? Like, God calls me or asks me or leads me. I hear from God. I hear the voice of God, and He compels me, draws me to something. So we're like, yeah, God's fixing to do something great. It's going to be awesome and cool and wonderful, and I'm going to be great. Oswald says, though, that we should never have the thought that our dreams of success are God's purpose for us. In fact, His purpose may be exactly the opposite. We have the idea that God is leading us toward a particular end or a desired goal, but He's not. The question of whether or not we arrive at a particular goal is of little importance, and reaching it becomes merely an episode along the way. What we see as only the process of reaching a particular end, God sees as the goal itself. I'm just going to share the whole thing with you because this is awesome. What is my vision of God's purpose for me? Whatever it may be, His purpose is for me to depend on Him and on His power now. If I can stay calm, faithful, and unconfused while in the middle of the turmoil of life, the goal of the purpose of God is being accomplished in me. God is not working toward a particular finish. His purpose is the process itself. What He desires for me is that I see Him. This is out of context, so I have to skip a little bit. It is the process, not the outcome, that glorifies God. God's training is for now, not later. His purpose is for this very minute, not sometime in the future. We have nothing to do with what follows our obedience, and we are wrong to concern ourselves with it. What people call preparation, God sees as the goal itself. God's purpose for us, God's call on our life, God's leading and drawing us to something is so that we can depend on Him. I've never seen any Christian successful ministry that where someone could accomplish what God has called them to without God. Now, I've seen some empires built with Christian names on it, but I'm talking about in ministry that has real impact. I find in my own life that the only places God leads me is where it's deep water and way over my head. And you know what happens when you go in deep water and you're way over your head? You need saving. And I think because of our culture and the way we teach in church, we get people saved to the future. And so once I'm saved, then I've made it to where I go no matter what happens in between. And what we miss is the saving is the purpose. And it's today. And it's tomorrow, and it's the next day, and it's in the morning, and it's at noon, and it's at night. And some of us need saving by the hour. How many of you guys can get over your head every hour of the day? Yeah. See, the purpose for God isn't to get you somewhere else in the future. He calls us to things knowing, and I don't think just knowing, but hoping on the road we realize that we need Him. That we are totally dependent on Him. That we will not survive until we come to the place where we pelican ourselves on Him. See, that's the point of it all. David says, I've been called to be this king. David was called to be a king. The road to that kingdom was harsh, though. There's a lot of places to give up. Then being king wasn't as cool as he thought it would be. And everything came apart. And things may not have been that bad. Maybe just David, you ever get in a place where you're like, everything's against me and everything's bad, and then somebody slaps you, and you're like, well, things weren't really that bad. I don't know what I was freaking out about. God takes us to these places like He took David, where David couldn't do it on his own. If you're not at a place where you need to cast everything in your life on God, it's coming. It's coming. If you got it all together, right now and you're king of the world, congratulations. It's coming. They're going to tell you that. It's coming. God will never leave you where you don't have to trust and depend on Him, where you don't have to cast yourself upon Him. He's going to constantly push you and stretch you and take you to a place where you need saving. So be careful. Be careful getting it all figured out. The thing is, you don't have to go through that stuff. You don't have to ride that roller coaster. Do you know you can dwell in the presence of God all the time? That way, when things come, it's just another day. Because I'm dependent on God every day anyway. I don't know where my next meal's coming from. I'm dependent on God. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm dependent on God. I'm going to depend on God every single day. I'm going to pelican myself onto God every day. Now I want you to close your eyes again. Now instead of picturing that pelican, I want to picture you flying. And you're just soaring. But now all of a sudden, man, the waters start to churn and the wind starts to blow and everything starts to come apart. Lightning striking all around you. Clouds are thundering and raging all around you. Darkness starts to just consume everything. And all you can see from your viewpoint, all you can see from your vantage point is the white caps on the waves below. And you're fearful for your life and you're fearful for everything that's going on and you're overwhelmed with the circumstance and the situation. But now it's time to pelican. And so you just let go and you dive straight into that, what you think is the end of you. But that place of release and that place of letting go and that place of diving head first and straight in, that's the arms of a loving and caring God who now wishes to feed you, clothe you, shelter you, and take care of you and meet your needs. Look at me, everybody, guys. God's not against you. Why do bad things happen to good people? I think everybody needs God. Whether you are good or evil, everybody needs God. And what I found about my own life is I rarely depend on God when everything's good. I've never seen anybody get stronger by lifting air. People get stronger by lifting more and more resistance. It's the way the world works. For us to become what God intends for us to become, we have to be taken to a place where nothing of us is left, where we have to pelican ourselves onto God. That's how we give it to God. We let go and we say, God, take me. And that don't mean quit trying. That means start listening. God's going to talk to you. He's going to walk with you. He's going to show you an out for every circumstance and every situation. It is not hopeless. It is not the end. It's not game over. God loves you and He wants life for you. And that salvation, that's being saved, made whole, transformed, changed, that's what God wants for us. But He wants it every single day of our lives. It's not a one-time thing to get us to somewhere else. He wants you in that vulnerable state of needing God every single day. Today, I think, is a good day for us all to cast our cares, our troubles, our depressions, our addictions, our failures, our accomplishments that are overstressing us and overwhelming us. It's a good day to just cast those things on God, to seek Him out. It's a good day to say, you know what? Today's the day I'm going to start reading my Bible again. Today's the day I'm going to start praying again. Today's the day I'm going to commune with my Father, my Creator, the one who loves me and cares for me when everyone else will hurt me and leave me and abandon me and die on me. I want to spend my time with the one who won't. I want to commune in that place. When we cry out for that, we truly come into the place of salvation, of the kingdom of God, of the kingdom of heaven, and the realities of a loving Father. That's what I encourage you to do today. Give it to God. Just give it to God. Ta-da! That was it. That was a long time to say that, wasn't it? Just give it to God. All right, if you guys will stand with me, I want to pray for you.